At a slow but menacing pace, the AT-ATs of Thrawn's counterforce drew near. In the heat of the moment, Plo Koon received orders to evacuate. The Jedi and commanders had absolute priority. After that, regular troops would be evacuated. But Thrawn had sent everything he had their way. On the beaches stood Goro, who after the invasion was stationed near Plo Koon's unit in preparation of a Wookiee diplomat rescue attempt. He stood beside his friend Virgil, who he got a close bond with during the horrors of the first beach assault, as well as Gladius. The three have been close ever since. But today, their will would be tested, as the troop transports had reached the shore. The clones opened fire, hoping to slow down the attack and win some time for the evacuation. The stormtroopers disembarked under heavy fire. Many quickly hid behind the transports or ducked in the water. They were so many that the clones positioned at the front stood no chance. The open water meant that the Imperials were easier targets, but their overwhelming number and heavy walkers made the task seem impossible. At the flank, where the water was too deep for light walkers, the two other AT-ATs took the clone towers under fire. While the battle was raging on, the clones desperately continued the evacuation of Jedi and began evacuating regular troops. But the surprise attack left them to using LAATs, meaning that there was no way to evacuate everybody in time. As quickly as they could, clones, Jedi, and a few rebels here and there climbed into the ships in hopes to escape. The ground troops at the beach continued to try and hold the line, but the situation seemed hopeless. Many clones were pinned down, wounded, or in a state of awe by the sudden counterattack. In a single moment, the clones' spirits were broken. More and more were evacuated. The route was dangerous, as they had to fly while fired upon. Some did not make it. But nevertheless, the pilots did their best to get everyone they could out of there. Wave after wave of clones headed to the Republic ships, knowing their friends on the beaches would probably not make it. Some of the ships became too full, and a few of the soldiers got panicked, blindly climbing in any ship that seemingly could hold more. For those who passed over the enemies, a sigh of relief was their reward. A large amount of the clones had been evacuated, but there were more scrambled across the area. The right flank was utter chaos. The two colossal AT-ATs ripped the soldiers and turrets to shreds. There was no way they could hold the flanks, and a retreat signal was given. Some of the pilots volunteered to head back in once they dropped off their soldiers. They would do anything they could to get their brothers out of Dodge. But the LZ was considered hot and very dangerous. For some, their bravery was in vain, as they got shot down, their wrecks covering the beach. Goro, Virgil, and Gladius were still holding their position. Many had died around them. Many of the troops were reserves or hardly trained. They were cannon fodder to the Imperial's deadly walkers. With a bit of luck, they did manage to take down an AT-ST, but at the flanks, the AT-ATs were still portraying their utter dominance. The last of the clones there ran for the ships, as those remaining in the turrets got turned to ash. The Imperials were unstoppable. The remaining forces were pushed further up the beach, as their turrets were destroyed or damaged. The battle drew to a close, as soon the clones would not have a window of opportunity left to evacuate. An older Jedi came to the aid of Goro and his friends to deflect some of the blaster fire, but Gladius got killed in the chaos. Moments after, an all-out retreat was given, forcing the clones to leave their fallen friends behind. The soldiers were urged to find any vehicle that had room left, as this was the final wave to evacuate. An absolute victory was given to the Empire. The armed troop transports rolled up the beach and took any stragglers under fire. Thrawn was responsible for the death of all these clones. The meltdown would make huge news across the galaxy. The Imperial propaganda team would portray the meltdown as a freak accident that worked out in their favor. Others would argue for a despicable act of sacrificing part of Thrawn's own forces. But the Rebel Alliance was currently not that occupied with the argument. They finally had a breakthrough on their plan concerning file WM-163. The file in question had the control scheme and mechanics of the AT-AT encrypted in them, meaning if the rebels managed to capture one intact, they would be able to use it against the Empire. One AT-AT would not be enough to win the war, but it could do wonders as a symbol of morale and be of great use in single battles. Finding a single AT-AT which seemed able to be captured proved harder than imagined. Many attempts failed, and the attacks had to be low profile in order to avoid the Empire knowing what they were trying to do. An attack on Endor turned out to be a disaster, as all of the rebels were wiped out. But on Scarif, the rebels found a potential spot where they could capture an AT-AT. Due to the small scattered islands, many of the AT-ATs were spread out, making it easier to focus on one. But the enemy needed to be blinded and deafened first. The rebels used a new tactic. Two separate groups lay in wait to attack the quick response force once a third group had turned off the communications array to communicate with other islands. The group that was responsible for this had disguised themselves as Imperial troops to get into the small comm center and turn off the array. As soon as this happened, the strike team lashed out. The few Imperial troops got taken by surprise and were quickly mowed down. Officers tried to call in reinforcements, but their communication devices were not working. Time was of the essence, as the main goal was to take out the TIE interceptors. After all the stormtroopers had been dealt with, the rebels quickly set up the charges and blew up the fighters, only to disappear again in the jungle. The same success was marked by the other strike team that took the other quick-time response force by surprise. Many fell before knowing what was going on. The presence of turrets made this area a bit more difficult, but rebel rocket launchers quickly nullified that aspect. The left team flanked through the bushes and pinned down any remaining stormtroopers. Only the two turrets in the back were left. They were no match for the strike team. Just as the others, They set up charges and blew up the fighters. Now that the Empire had no units to quickly react, it was time to assault the AT-AT and claim it as a prize.